Taking control of your finances can be easily one of the most daunting tasks that we all face on a daily basis, especially when you're young and just trying to get things figured out. But that's typically also the people that we see saying, I'm always broke, I have no money, and I need overdraft protection on my bank accounts. Look, whatever it may be, there are a few simple ways that you can stop being broke and take control of your finances. So in this video, we're going to talk all about that, and it mainly comes down to finding the underlying issue and working from there. The problem is most people don't seem to want to figure out what that underlying issue is. Typically, it's a lot easier to blame someone else for your financial problems. Your boss doesn't pay you enough, your career doesn't make enough, you spent too much money on going to college, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. You can become financially independent no matter where your income level is because you need to learn how to make do with what you get before you can move up to the next level. How can anyone expect that they're going to be able to live within their means at the next income level if they can't make it work at their current income level? Truthfully, it's rarely ever an income problem, and it's more of a spending problem. And that's the thing that most people don't want to admit. But when it comes down to it, that's the biggest thing. It doesn't matter how much money you make if you can't work with it, and if you spend too much of it, it's not going to matter how much you make, because in the long term, you're going to end up in the same position over and over again, no matter what your income level is. Now, there is an extreme circumstance where you do actually have an income problem, but we'll talk about that a little later on. Let's go ahead and talk more about finding the underlying issue to whether you have an income problem or a spending problem. As with every generalization, though, like I was talking about before, there are exceptions to the rule. And in our generation, I feel like a lot of people don't want to admit that they're not the exception to the rule. It is 100% possible that you are the exception to the rule. But let's work backwards a little first, and let's talk about some ways that you can determine if you actually do have an income problem. One of the easiest ways to determine if you have an income problem is that if you realize that you can't pay any bills before buying groceries. What you need to do is sit down and take a look at your income versus your expenses, because if you're making $2,100 a month and you're paying $1,000 a month in rent, for some reason in our society, that's actually considered normal. Now, I know it's hard to find a place for less than $1,000 a month. That's not necessarily the point I'm making. We're just using this as an example. So $2,100 a month in income, $1,000 a month in rent. Typically, people say it's safe for housing to take up about 50% of your income. However, if you're making that same $2,100 a month and your rent is $1,600 a month, that's when there could be a problem. By the time you've simply paid rent, you're much more strapped for cash than you should be. Assuming you pay another $100 a month in different insurances and $200 a month in a car payment, by that point, you only have $200 left for the entire rest of the month. That's one of the ways to know that you have an income problem. That leftover amount would then have to go to necessities, and by that point, $200 in necessities really isn't enough at all, especially to buy groceries. Things get worse, though, when you see that the average cost for groceries for a month, according to Mint, is $160 to $345. So after you pay all of your necessities just to live, by that point, you have no money left. That's one of the ways to tell that you have an income problem over a spending problem. That's pretty much it. Like I said, there are very few situations where you actually do have an income problem. So obviously the example I just used, it's an extreme case. Most people aren't going to be in that situation. And if you find yourself in that situation, that's when you need to be focused on growing your income. And we have a lot of resources on our website for that. So go ahead and check out the link down below, achievablefinance.com. Let's go ahead and break down how to determine if you have a spending problem. This is going to be the category that most people fall into. One of the easiest ways to tell if you have a spending problem is consumer debt, credit cards. If you notice that you have credit cards that you're barely able to make the minimum payments on, that's one of the ways to determine that you don't have an income problem, you have a spending problem. So credit cards are something that we talk a lot about at Achievable Finance, mainly because we found ourselves in that similar position just a couple of years ago. 2 years ago, I was in $20,000 roughly of credit card debt, plus a $20,000 car loan. So I understand what it's like to have just a massive amount of credit card debt that you're liable for and how difficult it can be to make those payments. But at the same time, it wasn't necessarily an income problem. It was that I was spending more than I was making. I was making roughly $2,000 a month at the time, and I was living at home, so I didn't have any rent. All I had really was my car and my insurance payments. And aside from that, I just had normal little things like food and groceries. Like once every 3 weeks, I would buy something from the grocery store. So really, there was no reason for me to be spending so much money on credit cards. I made every purchase I ever could on my good old friend, the Amex, and I wasn't putting money back for savings, and I wasn't doing anything for my financial future. I was just swiping on the credit card, making the payment, swiping on the credit card, making the payment, and that was up until I couldn't make those payments anymore. Eventually, it got to the point where I had racked up so much credit card debt, I couldn't even afford to make the monthly minimums. That's an easy way to tell if you have a spending problem. Some other ways to tell that you have a spending problem is that you make an average amount for your area, but you have trouble paying your bills. Now, obviously, if you have extreme medical bills that you need to be focused on and different stuff like that, that's a different case scenario. I'm talking about most people. Most people are going out and putting things on credit cards and living above their means just because it makes them feel a little better at night when they go to sleep, only to wake up the next morning and realize just how awful they feel about everything. Another way to tell is if you have no safety net and can't save 10% of your income. No matter what, you should save a minimum of 10% of your income. And if you can't put 10% away, you are spending way too much. 10% is such a minute amount to put back every month, but at the end of the year, it creates an additional month of expenses that you can pay. I can't stress this enough to people. If you put back 10%, as a minimum, you're going to feel a whole lot more secure in just a year from now. But people don't seem to think that's a good idea because they're having trouble paying for credit cards that are well more than 10% of their income. One of the biggest things, and I can't stress this enough, is watch our budget video, and it truly breaks down all the different ways that you can make a budget in your 20s and when you're starting out that's going to be extremely beneficial. It's one that we've used for years, and it's something that I truly stand by because it's the only budget I've ever found that works. But if you find that you can't put back 10% of your income every month, you are spending way too much. Another stupid simple way to tell if you have a spending problem is if you avoid checking your bank accounts because you just have that feeling. Look, I've had that feeling time and time and time again. I know what that feeling is like. Your stomach churns over because you feel like you just know that it's not going to be in there. So you just avoid checking it altogether. Look, that's the stupidest thing you can do. If you have that feeling, that's when it's time to check it, and that's when it's time to get things together. I've been there. I've been in that situation. That feeling sucks. But at the end of the day, if you don't take that feeling and learn something from it, you're never going to fix the actual problem itself. So check your bank account. Check it every day. Make sure that your spending is in line with what you're actually needing and what you're actually wanting, not just spending to spend. If you're checking your bank account and you get this churn in your stomach every time you open the app or open the website, that's one of the easiest ways to determine if you have a spending problem. Another easy way to tell is if you put something on a credit card with a pay it later mentality. Look, we live in a society that is surrounded by credit and surrounded by debt. You can finance a chair now. Like, you can go out to furniture stores and finance a chair, and I just don't get it. If you can't afford a chair, don't buy a chair. There are cheaper chairs. It is something that I really just don't understand. Why do people feel the need to go finance furniture? It's just absolutely absurd, but that's the thing. Credit has become such an everyday thing for us now. It's not a utility anymore like it was at one point. It is now just something that we expect. There are websites that will let you finance AirPods. I'm sorry, if you can't afford AirPods, don't buy AirPods. If you consistently find yourself in this situation over and over and over again where you need to take credit out to buy something simple, or you need to be spotted for overdraft protection, you have a spending problem. But people just fail to admit this to themselves because they blame other people and they see it as, it's not my problem, it's my boss's problem because he doesn't pay me enough. But that's not true. And last but not least, one of the other dead giveaways that you have a spending problem is that you avoid lowering your lifestyle because you're afraid people will think you're broke. Now, I know this may sound absurd and ridiculous, but if you let it sink in for a minute, I think you may realize that you can relate to it, because I know for sure that I did. I was afraid to lower my lifestyle because I thought people would judge me. Here's the thing. It was a lot more shameful to go to bankruptcy court than it was to just lower my lifestyle back for a little bit. So overall, while it may seem easy to go ahead and blame other people that you're not making enough money, that they should be paying you more money, and that you're worth more and your time is worth more, overall, that's probably not true. Sorry to break the hard truth to you, but if you were currently worth more than what you were making, you would be making that amount. So what's typically the problem is that you have a spending issue. So really, you can fix the problems in similar ways, but here's the thing. The biggest issue lies with Well, lying to yourself. Once you can admit to yourself that other people aren't the problem and that it's you, that's when you're going to be able to take control of your finances and stop being broke. All right, so let's talk about step 2, taking control of your finances. So while it may be a little overwhelming at first, if you take this step by step and just start slowly working away at it, it'll seem a lot less overwhelming and you'll be able to make a lot more progress than you think. So let's talk about one of the first things that you can do, and that is know your numbers. So understanding where your finances sit can be the biggest part of getting control of your finances. Obviously, that's such a simple thing, but I feel like so many people avoid looking at their bank accounts because they have, like I said, that feeling. So one of the easiest things you can do is log into your bank accounts right now, all of your financial accounts, and write down the balances. That's it. So the next step may be a little more daunting. This is something where you're actually going to have to think and you're going to have to really dive deep into your finances. So what I want you to do is take the previous 6 months of your finances and go through and highlight all of the expenses that look a little off to you, or highlight the expenses that maybe you think, did I really need to spend that much to get this particular item? Or did I really need to spend that much in this particular situation? Mark anything that you see as something that was impulsive or unnecessary, and then put everything to the side. Weirdly, this is one of the things that actually helped me in bankruptcy. I was actually legally required to go through the past 6 months of my transactions and highlight anything over $500 and explain what it was for. The first thing that really stuck out to me when I did this was that I was spending an overwhelming amount of money on food and restaurants. I can't begin to explain why anyone would need to spend that much money on food. I'm talking like $1,500 a month on food, and there's just no reason for it. I was eating out for every meal. I was going out to eat every single day, and I just can't even begin to tell you how stupid of a financial decision that is. You may also notice that you're spending an overwhelming amount of money on clothes. I know I was at one point. Rather than just simply doing laundry, I would just go buy more clothes. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but as a 20-year-old male, I didn't want to do laundry. So what did I do? I just went out and bought more clothes, and I put it on a credit card. And you're starting to see where the problems are forming. I mean, eating out every day, multiple times a day, and never washing clothes and just buying more instead. I mean, I think you're seeing the real issues here. Financial problems are actually linked to everyday life problems. So get a clearer understanding of what you can cut back and cut back. And then what you need to do from there is review this every 3 months for the next year. So every quarter, just go ahead and review all of your finances and go through your transactions and mark anything that you deem to be a little unnecessary. By a year in, you'll start to recognize those patterns as you're doing them in person. It may take some time, but overall, I think you're going to be in a much better position later on in life than you would be if you just ignored the problem completely. There's also the route of budgeting. Now, we just did an entire video around budgeting. I highly recommend everyone watch that video on budgeting. It's truly, for me, the only budget I've ever been able to use that's flexible and allows me to invest in my future and have fun in the moment. So if you're interested, go ahead and watch that video. I'll break it down real quick. Essentially what I'm talking about here is you have necessities at 50%, and then you have investments, long-term spending, education, play and fun, and gratitude. And those are all of the different ways that you need to split up your money. And if you can do that, you're going to be in a really solid financial situation. So now it's time to talk about the one that I don't think most people need to go for right away. What I think most people need to do is get their current spending under control and then move on from there. But everyone wants to know different ways they can increase their income. We also just did a video on this. Be sure to check that out. But here are some of the ways that you can increase your income. Now, I want to start this with a little warning. If you think that increasing your income is going to be the be-all, end-all of your financial success, and once you increase your income a little bit here and a little bit there, that you're going to be in a much better financial situation, you're lying to yourself. You're not really going to be able to take any different financial situation and income situation and turn it into something more than what you currently have now. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If you can't control what you make now, and if you can't control what you spend now, it doesn't matter how much you're going to make. You're just going to keep increasing your lifestyle along with that. So if you think that increasing your income is the best way to do this, you're lying to yourself, and you really need to sit down and look at your own spending and then focus on making more money. So once you get your current financial situation under control, that's when you can look into increasing your income. I really wouldn't recommend it beforehand. Otherwise, you are just statistically going to end up in the same situation. So I know that's the hard truth. I know that's the truth most people don't want to come here for, but It's the truth that someone needs to tell you. I know this for a fact too because I tried increasing my income without really taking control of my current financial situation. It doesn't work. You just start to get it in your head that like, oh, okay, well, I can make this payment, so I can go out and do this too, and oh, well, I can pay a lot more on this payment than I could a few months ago, so I can go out and do this too. You just end up in the same cycle. You're wasting your own time, you're wasting everyone else's time. Focus on controlling your own finances now, and then worry about increasing your income. Once you have all of your different expenses set aside, you have your budget laid out in your head, let's talk about increasing your income. Now, there's a few different ways to do this. I want to be clear on something, though. There is no technical passive way of making money. Everything that is going to generate you any good substantial amount of money is going to require some action, whether it be now and the payoffs later or whether it be now and the payoffs now. There seems to be this myth going around online that you can do all of these things to make passive income. To a point, yes, but a lot of that passive income has to be maintained. We make $20-something thousand a month in affiliate sales, but at the end of the day, if that is not maintained and we don't work on promoting that day after day, that goes away. The only real exception would be real estate investing, but to do that you have to hire a property manager. Otherwise, you are then actively managing the property and then it's not passive. So typically when people talk about passive, they're trying to talk to you about this fantasy idea that there is passive income. There's really not. There are a few ways to generate it, but overall it requires work, it requires effort, and if you don't put in the work and effort, it's not going to come in. So let's be real. Most of the time, the online side hustle and the online gigs that you're doing on the side, they're not going to work too well. You're going to make a little bit of money, but overall it's not going to be anything sustainable. This is when you're in the mindset of, oh, well, if I could just make a little bit more money, I could pay off this bill, and then I could do this, and then I could make this happen. Again, it's just kind of lying to yourself. If you're not going to commit to something, odds are it's not going to work. That's not the pessimistic side, that's just more of the realistic side. If you can't commit to something, it's not going to work out. Now, there are situations where it does. I'm not going to say it never happens, because it does. And there are exceptions to every rule, but overall what I'm speaking here is if you aren't going to commit to it, odds are you probably shouldn't do it. But that's not to say it can't be done. So if that's what you're looking for, let's go ahead and talk about some ways that you can start a side hustle. So obviously, first and foremost, is passive investing. This is my personal favorite because it's very simple to understand. This certainly is one that takes the most time, but in my opinion, it is the one that has the best results long term. Even if you start with a small amount now, it can grow into a life-changing amount over the next 15, 20 years. Now, I know most people are looking for a right now solution, so that's why I'm only briefly touching on this, but I want to say passive investing is by far the best way to grow your finances long term. It is the best way to gain financial independence long term, so don't ignore it, don't rule it out. Some of these other ways are more temporary, and I don't mean temporary of they're not going to be around in 10 years. I mean temporary of they're only going to solve most people's problems temporarily. So that would be something like drop shipping. Now, I know this comes from a very pessimistic point of view, but this is what I'm trying to get across to people. If you're looking for a quick buck, an easy buck, odds are you're not in the right financial state. That's why I'm really only briefly touching on some of these, because drop shipping is one of those examples where if you're going to commit to it 100%, that's going to be your thing, you're going to make it happen, that's great. But you've probably not thought through all of the competition, all of the money you're going to have to spend on advertising, and all of the different aspects to drop shipping that most people don't tell you on the front end. I know for a fact a lot of customers' biggest issues with the company they're using that's drop shipping is that their shipping times take so long. How are you going to combat that? There's so many things that I feel like people don't think about when they get into drop shipping. They think, oh, well, I don't have to do anything. I set up a website, I run some ads, and that's it. That's not it. And I think people really need to understand that they're making a commitment to something that doesn't necessarily line up with what they actually want. So then there's the virtual assistant route. So unlike a regular part-time job, a virtual assistant gig allows you to essentially set your own hours as long as you're getting most of the work done, or well, I should say all of the work done for the people you're working with. So this can be a very sustainable route because it allows you to work your full-time job during the day and then go home and then work a little bit more for someone else. Now, I get most people want to be working for themselves if they're stumbling across these videos, but realistically speaking, that's not where most people are financially right now. So I think it's important to look at some of these different gigs. A virtual assistant or a freelancing gig is a great alternative to start working for yourself in a way, but also have a dependable source of income. Take it for what you will, but social media management as a virtual assistant is something that we've looked for years, and we've worked with a few in the past, and it's something that I know is very beneficial to the company that they're working with, and it can also be very beneficial to you. So it's definitely something that you should check out if you're interested in that. And then there's also the route of the regular part-time job. Now, I know this is the one that is the least sexy of all of them, but it is definitely something that I think needs to be talked about. There is nothing wrong with working a full-time job and a part-time job temporarily to make ends meet, so to say. So those are just a few different ways that you can increase your income that I feel like a lot of people just don't talk about or ignore or don't want to acknowledge. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, and I will see you guys in the next video. Also, be sure to check out the article that correlates with this video. You can do that down below in the description. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.